Welcome to the SCV Chamber's COVID-19 Resource Webinar Series. I'm Peter Warda with the SCV Chamber and will be hosting today's webinar. A couple housekeeping notes about today's webinar. All participants who joined the call are on mute. Please leave it this way to allow presenters to share their information uninterrupted. If you have called in, please make sure your phone is on mute as well. The system will remove you from the webinar if you are not on mute. We will have a question and answer session at the conclusion of the presentation. If you wish to ask a question, please use the chat feature located at the bottom center on the screen. The chat icon is the center icon. If you hover over it with your mouse, it will turn blue. Click on it. A chat window will appear on the right side of your screen. Simply click at the bottom where it says enter chat message and type your question. Press enter when done. Your question will go to the host. If during the call you are experiencing difficulty, please email hello@scv, like Santa Clarita Valley, chamber.com. We are monitoring that email live during the webinar to assist participants. If you are just joining the call, we will begin momentarily with our presenters. Again, everyone joining the call is on mute, and questions will be received via the chat feature located at the bottom center on the WebEx screen. The chat icon is the center icon. If you hover over it with your mouse, it will turn blue. Click on it. A chat window will appear on the right side of your screen. Simply click at the bottom where it says enter chat message and type your question. Press enter when done. Your question will go to the host. We will begin momentarily. Thank you again for joining the SCV Chamber's COVID-19 Resource Webinar. During this challenging time, the SCV Chamber has activated its Rapid Response Communications program to get information out to our members and the entire business community. While Chamber membership gets you access to important information during normal circumstances, we felt it was vital for the health, safety, and success of our entire local business community to provide broad-based support and assistance. In addition to our email communications you should be receiving, the Chamber created a COVID-19 page on our website specifically with business-related resources. Please visit scvchamber.com where you can find details on HR compliance, unemployment benefits, and business disaster financing options, among other vital resources. And we are, of course, on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. The Chamber is also proud to have released our SCV Proud video. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, visit our website at scvchamber.com and click on the COVID-19 tab to watch our video. For those of you who have not yet registered, we have our legal and HR webinar tomorrow at 2 p.m. presented by Brian Kegley of Poole, Shaffrey & Kegley. Please visit our website to register. Lastly, in our weekly business update e-blast this morning, we sent a survey asking all businesses to participate so we may be able to address what resources are most needed. As we begin our program, we want to thank our presenters for helping put together today's Chamber webinar. Thank you to Kevin Holmes and Eric Rockwell from Martini Akpovi Partners CyberSecure for providing us with this information. Martini Akpovi Partners CyberSecure will be offering 10% off their services for any current standing Chamber members. If you would like to take advantage of this offer, please email us at hello@scvchamber.com and we will assist you. Today's webinar will cover the top 10 essentials that a business needs to take now to keep their environment and their clients' environment safe. If you are a business owner, this information will help you understand long-term strategic implications of the decisions you need to make today. As I mentioned, during this time, the SCV Chamber has activated its Rapid Response Communications Program to deliver current information to the business community. The Chamber remains open for business. The Chamber remains open for business via phone, email, and online opportunities like today's webinar. We've adapted to this fast-changing dynamic situation to continue providing value-driven programming and business-focused value for local businesses. We will now begin with our presentation. Kevin and Eric.
Great. Thanks so much, Peter. I appreciate it. Yeah, we really want to commend the Chamber for the work that it's doing for putting on this series of webinars because it is communicating information that's vital for business owners and management teams to be keenly aware of. My firm, Martini Akpovi Partners, is a regional public accounting firm. We have offices in Valencia, Encino, and Glendale, and I'm the partner in charge of our Valencia office. I'm also in charge of MAP CyberSecure, which is an affiliate of Martini, and MAP CyberSecure provides cybersecurity assessments and certifies an entity's information security level. Our main presenters today are Dave Watts and Eric Rockwell. They're both information technology and information security experts and are the lead technical partners in MAP CyberSecure. They are also partners in a separate business that provides information security consulting and incident management and monitoring services. Dave and Eric will share with you the key considerations that you need to be aware of when deploying a remote workforce. So Dave and Eric, you can take it from here.
Thank you, Kevin.
Well, thank you, Kevin. So Dave, this means that all the cyber criminals can't work anymore because they're not considered critical infrastructure, right?
I'm sure they're following the rules, sure.
Quite the opposite, unfortunately. So what we're going to be talking about right now is what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, a dramatic increase in cyber criminal activity worldwide. And we're going to be going over the cyber criminal playbook, how they're trying to take advantage of COVID-19 for their own purposes, and what companies should be doing to protect themselves against this increase in cyber attacks. And it's pretty simple. It's nothing new, but cyber criminals have realized that now more than ever, the entire workforce has remote access. So people in offices that didn't have remote access before have remote access today. They understand that a lot of the world, especially companies in the US, have opened the doors to let people work from home. So they are primarily focused on phishing passwords, which is an easy way to gain remote access. That means that they send an email out. We're going to be giving some examples of this in a few minutes, but they send emails out trying to trick people into logging into a web page that they think is their company, but it's really a way for them to get somebody's password. And once they break in, they ultimately are trying to exfiltrate data or get people to buy gift cards that have to do with COVID-19. We'll give some examples of that, or compromised data. We believe that we're going to see a skyrocket in both successful ransomware attacks and also the amount of money that cyber criminals are asking as a ransom. It's going to be going up into the hundreds of thousands of dollars on average. So this is all stuff that we're going to be talking about today, and we're going to be talking about what in the business community we should all be doing to make sure that we can work from home, but we can do it in a secure way that's not going to let the bad guys in.
Eric, I'd like to add one thing to that. So you're right. All the cyber criminals are going to know that everyone's working remotely, but I think they're also going to recognize, and this is my fear or our fear, is that a lot of this remote access was set up very quickly for all the people that didn't previously have remote access. So a lot of times when things are done quickly, corners are cut, security corners are cut, and that's what we're concerned about, and that's what we want to make sure that you're aware of, that make sure you haven't cut any of these security corners when you set up your remote access for everyone.
Exactly. We're going to be going over a checklist of items also, and it's critical that everybody meets with their head of IT or their outsourced IT provider and gets evidence that these different things were done. This screenshot represents 1 hour in global cyber attacks that we see in our security operations center every day. This particular screenshot was from Friday morning, And like we said, there's been just an enormous increase in these cyber attacks. They're hitting every remote access door like VPN servers really hard, Office 365 really hard, Google really hard, trying to break in. And the things that we talk about today are not just things that we made up that we think might help. These are items that come from the U.S. Center for Internet Security and the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And these are known ways of identifying, protecting, and protecting information and detecting people trying to break into your information. So this is all stuff from a proven cybersecurity framework that we didn't make up, that we can apply to making sure everybody can work safely during this time from home. So these are the 10 things that we're going to be going over today, and we've broken them out into level 1 and level 2 controls. The level 1 controls are things that you absolutely have to do, no questions asked. If you compromise on these things, then it will likely result in a breach. Level 2 things are things that we highly recommend, but after you've finished the level 1 items. The level 2 things also might require a higher level of complexity or a specialist to help with, but the level 1 things are things that any IT department should be able to execute. So we're going to be going over these things one at a time, starting with level 1, enabling multi-factor authentication on all remote access, restricting remote access to a limited geography so that the entire world can't get in remotely, only people that you have working from where they work from home. Standardizing on a remote access technology, knowing who logged in and from where, and actually alerting on failed login attempts, and also auditing remote access on a regular basis during this time. So that's what we're going to start with. So Dave, multi-factor authentication has been around for years, but let's just kind of start from the beginning. What exactly is multi-factor authentication?
So multi-factor authentication says that in addition to your username and password, which we refer to collectively as credentials, so in addition to your credentials, you actually have to have something physical that then proves that you're the right person that is using these credentials. So it's not another password, because that would be still a credential. It's something physical. In the older days, we used to use something that was called an RSA key. It was something you might have gotten from your employer or from your bank that has a 6-digit number on it that you would key in when you're logging in. That's an example of multi-factor authentication. Much more common now, though, is multi-factor authentication applications that run on your phone. And therefore, when you're logging in, it sends you a prompt to your phone, because only you are supposed to have your smartphone. And then you acknowledge, yes, that's me trying to log in. And then that's the second factor to authenticate you, and then you're allowed in.
Cool. Totally makes sense. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of IT teams over the last few weeks rush and set up remote access without multi-factor authentication. Last Thursday, our incident response team collectively spent 27 hours responding to a remote access breach for a pharmaceutical company because they tried to mobilize the workforce, and unfortunately, they did it in an insecure way, and everybody had direct access to a whole bunch of these remote desktop servers, and cybercriminals found a way to not only break in, but immediately start stealing data and siphoning out their intellectual property. And the funny thing about that story is that it wasn't just one cyber criminal that broke in. They were getting attacked by hundreds of cyber criminals at the same time. And the more elite cyber criminal that actually broke in and was exfiltrating data, he went completely undetected at first. And the reason they knew they were under attack was because a lower level cyber criminal was running an attack on one of the accounts that alerted one of the IT people that somebody was trying to break in. So if that cyber criminal hadn't done that, then the more elite cyber criminal would have been able to exfiltrate more data. So make sure that you have...
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry, Eric.
I was just going to say, make sure that you have multi-factor authentication enabled, and it can be something simple. It can be multi-factor authentication on the VPN. If you don't have MFA on the VPN, that is a huge risk. It can be something like LogMeIn Professional, who is, I believe, giving away 2 weeks for free right now. That's a really easy way to remote access your computers securely and turn MFA on. What were you going to say, Dave?
I was going to say, one of the things that I think is a common thought, or perhaps I'm going to call it a misconception by a lot of business owners is, well, you gave that example. Is that really going to affect me? I mean, like, what are the chances someone's going to try to break into my business? You know, they don't know who I am. They're not going to target me, et cetera. And I think that what a lot of people may not realize is it's not personal in most cases. It's the cyber criminals have very, very fast, very sophisticated computer systems that are basically trolling or searching the internet for any of these open vulnerabilities. So they're going to be looking for ways to log in that don't require multi-factor authentication. And so it's literally going to be like someone walking down a neighborhood, or excuse me, walking through a parking lot. Oh, this car is locked. Let me try the next one. This car is locked. Let me try the next one. Oh, this one's open. Now I'm going to try to break in or start the car. So it's that impersonal, but that's still how you get breached, and that leads to a huge mess. Both it's embarrassing and it's also expensive.
Right.
So these things are important. Don't try to cut corners.
And we're going to talk a little bit later about how to find out if you have insecure VPNs or remote desktop ports that are exposed that might be vulnerable to attack. So we're going to talk about that later. But step number one is making sure that when you and your entire workforce log in remotely, make sure that it requires multi-factor authentication, something like a text message on your phone or an app on your phone that you have to click an approve button on, and make sure that there's evidence that every person with remote access has multi-factor authentication enabled. We have responded to another breach during the last couple of weeks where IT configured some people with multi-factor authentication, but they missed some people by mistake, and a cyber criminal broke into one of their accounts. So it's critical to make sure this is 100%, nothing missed. So the second part is making sure that once you have secure remote access enabled that requires multi-factor authentication, you don't have it open to the entire world. So Dave, if you think about some of our clients that are here in LA, I can think of a few that are global, that have offices all over the place. I can think of a few that are local, that only have offices in LA. And the ones that only have offices in LA, their entire workforce happens to live in, wait for it, Los Angeles. So they don't need remote access. Yeah.
Go ahead. I was going to say, even the ones that are, you said are, have global, it's still usually specific places outside of Los Angeles, specific countries that they're working from. It's not all countries. It's just specific countries that they're working from.
Exactly.
And what were you going to say? You were going to say something about if they're not working, they don't need to access anything from LA, then what?
Then you configure their accounts to only have remote access from LA or California or even the United States. This screenshot actually came from last week, and so all those red dots on the globe, those represent real cyber criminals. They're known cyber criminals. We have a national security feed that lets us know that these IP addresses that these attacks are coming from have been associated with other cyber crimes. So these are known cyber criminals, and they're actively trying to break in real time. And if you don't have anyone that's working remotely or living in, let's say, Africa or Russia or Australia or the Netherlands, you simply shut that down and provision it so that the users can get in remotely from wherever they're working from, which is from home right now probably. So this is really easy. Everybody has one home. They're not traveling right now. This is a really effective security control to implement. and it's very logical, but it's also one of the security controls that we find that's most commonly missed when we're conducting audits for companies. We find that everybody who has remote access can log in from anywhere in the world, and sure enough, there's some person in Russia that's trying to break in as we speak.
Which systems, Eric, should they be doing this on, and limiting the geographical access?
Great question. So it all starts with identifying where your most valuable and sensitive information is stored. We kind of call that the crown jewels. So it's very important for all business leaders to know where the crown jewels are, and you might have multiple sets of crown jewels in your organization, multiple departments or business units. So ultimately, these controls that we're talking about, like the geo-filtering, like the multi-factor authentication, they have to be enabled on anything that lets them into the crown jewels or anything that's confidential that the business doesn't want leaking out. And one thing that's very common is we'll come in and we'll start asking questions about where the most valuable and sensitive information is stored. And it turns out that a lot of the security that they had in place was not actually protecting the crown jewels. It was protecting something, but no one had actually thought about how the security, how the multi-factor authentication that was in place would prevent someone from breaking into the crown jewels or not.
We've seen a lot of that too with perhaps clients that historically only stored the crown jewels on their local area network in their office, perhaps. And
right.
Over the last 5+ years, more and more firms have transferred some of or all of their crown jewels to different cloud resources, whether it be AWS or Azure or Office 365, et cetera. So it's really important to figure out where your crown jewels are and make sure that what Eric's talking about is applied to all of those locations, not just your local area network.
Exactly right. Well said. The next control, number 3, that we're talking about is standardizing on a remote access technology. One of the mistakes that we've seen made during this time is companies realized that their VPN had a limit of 25 or 100 people or something like that, and they never thought they would need to have more than that working concurrently. And they said, well, now let's go find another solution. Or some department heads figured out they could go to teamviewer.com and click on a button and get free remote access or something like that. But we're recommending that you standardize on one remote access technology, really no more than 2, because you have to apply all these security controls to every remote access technology. So ultimately, you want to only have one remote access technology, and you want to make sure that your entire team knows what that is, that this is our only authorized method of remote access, and make sure that everybody knows to be aware that cybercriminals are sending out fake emails from IT right now with fake links to log in remotely, and they're really, really good. And they look like they're coming from Microsoft or Zoom or IT or your company. We've seen this happen where cybercriminals put a logo on an email and they start sending off emails to all of your customers. We can talk about how they harvest that information. But ultimately, what they're trying to do is trick somebody into clicking on a link, and it says you need to log in with your username and password, and that's how they phish someone's username and password. And right now, a lot of these fake emails are being targeted towards remote access or online meeting technologies like Zoom, because they know that a lot of companies are setting up Zoom for the first time, so there's a million fake Zoom emails floating around. And when somebody on your team gets it, it only takes one person to read it and say, the company set us up with Zoom. I guess I better click here to set up my account. And then it says to make sure that you are authenticated, please type in your company username and password. And they type in their username and password, and now the cybercriminal has it, and it's as simple as that.
So a couple of points on that I would want to make, please. One is, as the business owner or the managing partner of a firm, you should be deciding on what these remote access methods are going to be. I mean, you can confer with IT, but you want to make sure that you've standardized on one or maybe two, sometimes there's a reason to have two, remote access methods, and then make sure that IT is going to enforce that, with your employees. Ask for evidence from IT that everyone is set up, like Eric said, so that they don't miss someone, okay? Don't go for free remote access technology. Free is the most expensive thing you'll ever get because you probably with a free access are not going to have the ability to control or require two-factor authentication perhaps, et cetera.
Exactly.
You do want this managed and pushed out and controlled by your IT department or your outsourced IT company that you use, but make the decisions should be when you're conferring with your IT. Don't just abdicate it to IT. Have a discussion with them. Find out how they're going to prove to you that you only have these methods, that you only are allowing multi-factor authentication, that you're prohibiting these geographical locations from coming in that your employees don't work in, et cetera.
Exactly. Very well said. So the next thing that we want to talk about, control number 4, is actually taking the time to know who logged in and from where. And this might only take 5, 10, or 15 minutes every week, but if you have your email hosted with Microsoft or Google, or you have a cloud provider like Microsoft Azure or AWS, you can gather all this information. You can do it on a day-by-day basis, typically for free. And it's very valuable to know who logged in and from where. And this is the proof that no one is breaking into your system or logging in from the wrong spot. So in this example down here, we can see all these successful logins from Russia, Finland, Mexico. So that tells us that there's something wrong because we don't have anybody working from home in those geographies. And we want to have some sort of report on the top right, like this example here that shows that there were 0 logins from foreign countries. So it's very important to audit this on at least a weekly basis. And again, it only takes a few minutes because there's not going to be that much activity over the course of a week. And specifically look for and investigate any remote access during strange times of the day or from foreign geographies that you don't recognize.
And again, as a business owner or a managing partner, you can ask your IT to provide evidence of this. You'll hear us say a lot of times, trust but verify. It's a great thing to ask someone. It's a great thing to trust someone. They've worked for you forever. If they're doing a great job, there's no reason they shouldn't be able to provide evidence of what you're asking for. And that's how you know that it's really for sure being done, that nothing has been missed by accident.
Exactly right. So this is a real screenshot here, by the way, from last Friday. And control number 5 is alerting on failed login attempts. So Dave, why would I care if somebody types their password in wrong?
Well, if it's, Fred from accounting and he maybe mistypes his password once or twice because he has fat fingers or he wasn't paying attention, that's okay. If instead, Fred from accounting, you see hundreds, of login attempts, and especially at maybe really strange hours, then we know someone is probably trying to break in with his credentials. And they might even have his credentials, but maybe they're trying to figure out how to get around the two-factor authentication, et cetera.
Exactly. Exactly right. So in this screenshot from last Friday, this is a real customer. We can see that there was a cyber attack going on, and we can see that they were not trying to break into Office 365 primarily or something like that. They were trying to break into the company's VPN server. So between 2 a.m. and 8 a.m. on Friday, this company had almost 6,000 failed logins, and over 5,000 of them were on the VPN. So this particular cyber criminal was targeting their VPN, trying to break into it. And we can see that at 2 in the morning, there were about 500 failed logins per hour. and that eventually started tailoring down to under 200 around 8 a.m. That's not because the cyber criminal was going on their union-mandated break or something like that. Typically, these cyber criminals operate in foreign countries where it's not, it's a different time zone, and 2 a.m. our time might be 2 p.m. their time. So a lot of this activity happens when we're sleeping, and they know that we're sleeping and probably not looking, and it happens to be the middle of their day, so it's not inconveniencing their schedule.
So, something else I think that's an important thing to point out, because someone might look at this report and go, oh, wow, this is fantastic. These were all login failures. Nobody got in. That's great. I'm fine. But why would that not necessarily be the case, Eric? Why would you care about knowing about the failures even though they're not getting in?
Well, if you know that somebody's trying to break into your house, then you can do something about it. And the same applies to your network. So in this case, the cyber criminal is getting way too far, and they should not be able to try to break into the VPN this way. So there's something that we want to do further back, like enable a geofiltering control or simply block their IP addresses. We want to do something so that this bad actor can stop trying to break in.
Yeah, so it's kind of like you might have someone's trying to actually pick the lock on the door inside your garage that goes into your house, but maybe the outside garage door shouldn't be open. So we want to make sure that we're taking all those different levels of security so they can't get as far as they've gotten.
Exactly, and maybe we could have somebody do something about that particular bad actor, so that specific bad actor can't try to break in anymore. So the last of the level 1 controls that we're going to talk about has to do with personal file sharing or file sharing from personal assets. So now that the workforce has remote access and people that have never had remote access now have remote access, we want to make sure that we do not allow users to transfer any documents to their personal assets. So a lot of these file sharing or remote access tools like Remote Desktop or LogMeIn or Go to My PC, they have file sharing capability, so you can easily copy something from the company intranet or SharePoint site or file server and save it on your home computer where it's easier to work on. But this is one of the most common ways that we see data get stolen, and it's because a home computer has way too much access to company information, and that home computer is used by everybody in the family, and the kids come over with their friends for the weekend and have a sleepover, and somehow they accidentally downloaded malware on it. And now the malware is just sitting there, and the malware is talking to a cyber criminal, and it's looking for things like Word documents or PDF files or spreadsheets, and every time it sees a spreadsheet copied to the computer, it makes a copy of it and sends it off to somebody in Russia or something like that. So once we allow people to copy information to an uncontrolled personal asset, we completely lose control over it. So it's very important that you know who has the ability to do this, and you do not allow users to transfer documents to uncontrolled personal assets during this time.
Eric, would you include on that? We have it listed as local file sharing, but would you also include, if it's a personal asset, and by asset we usually mean personal computer owned by the employee, not owned by the firm, but would you also include installing full-blown Outlook on those computers? Definitely.
And here's the problem with that. If people start installing Microsoft Outlook on a home computer and it's connecting to Google or Office 365, it's downloading a copy of all of their email to that computer. And we respond to breaches all the time where a cyber criminal compromised a company simply by compromising a home computer that was uncontrolled, and they got a copy of the mailbox. And when we do a forensic investigation on the mailbox, we find tons of regulated information like credit card numbers or social security numbers of clients or customers that they were communicating with or employees. And now the cyber criminal has a copy of all that information, and it's just way too risky. And there's no real business case or reason to have them have a copy of all of this data, including their email, on a personal asset, like a home computer. So the next thing is very important, and it is a training control, and it's reminding your team not to click on any email links during this time, even if it's from known senders, unless you have verified offline with the sender that it was actually sent from them and it is safe. So I want to talk about this scenario for a minute. What we've been seeing, because everybody now has remote access, and cybercriminals are sending these fake Outlook emails and Office 365 emails and Zoom emails and stuff like that, they're phishing more passwords now than they've ever phished previously. And sometimes, let's say they break into Sally from accounting's mailbox, and now they have a copy of Sally's mailbox. We can talk about how they monetize it. A couple different things that they'll probably do is they will immediately start replying to every email that Sally has ever sent with a similar link saying, you need to open this important document because of blah, 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 maybe related to COVID-19 somehow. And it's the same sort of link that's going to ask them to type in their username and password. And because the email really came from the real Sally, people don't think twice about it, and now the cybercriminal got another password and another password. So they're just gaining access to tons and tons of email accounts that have controlled information or confidential information living in their mailboxes, and they're just getting access to way more than they should. And eventually they start getting accounts that have VPN access or remote desktop access or access to SharePoint. And we want to prevent that from happening, and it can be done simply by verifying offline that the person asking you to click on a link and type in your password actually sent it. And chances are right now they probably didn't.
And offline means don't email them and ask them. It means phone them,
right,
or find a different methodology, whether it's a text or a phone call, and ask them that. You do not want to, you cannot assume that email is secure. It's very easy to impersonate someone else's email. So if you have a question about an email that you received from someone, offline does not mean reply and ask, is this valid?
Exactly right. Especially if the cybercriminal has compromised Sally's mailbox, they're going to respond and say, yes, it is absolutely valid, and it's imperative that you do it right now, or all these bad things will happen.
There was
the next thing that we want to talk about.
Did you talk about the second item on your other slide about how to navigate it directly? I don't remember. Did you say that?
No, go ahead and talk about that, Dave.
Okay. So instead of clicking on a link in an email, so let's say that Eric sends me an email and says, Dave, because of we're doing this webinar later, I need you to log into WebEx or whatever, and I'm supposed to put in my credentials, okay? And so that would be a phishing attempt if he didn't really send it. But especially if you get something like from Amazon or your bank or anything right now, then it might be, instead of clicking on the link, we recommend exiting out of there, out of your email, go to a browser, type in the actual address of the browser, of the company you want to navigate to. Do not copy and paste it from your email because it might have a wrong address in there. So if Amazon sent me something and said, because of COVID-19, we're not going to be able to deliver packages to you unless you confirm your address or confirm you still want them right now or something. And then instead of me clicking on that link, I should go to Amazon, log in as myself, and see if there really is a message about that. Do not click on the link. This is far too dangerous of a time to do that. It'll take an extra minute. It'll save you so much grief and time and money.
Yep, well said. So remember, cybercriminals are doubling down right now in two different ways. They are trying to phish passwords, and that's done simply by sending a link, and people click on that link in an email, and it goes to a fake Microsoft login page like the one on the top right. and that's how they get their password, or they just start firing password guesses at the VPN server or remote desktop server. And if some of these other controls are not in place, they'll eventually figure out the password and break in. And it's very simple to do. An 8-character password can be cracked in under 5 minutes right now. That's how easy it is for these bad actors to break in remotely. So along the lines of not letting that happen, we use a term called hardening in the security world. And what that means is configuring something to its most secure but still usable configuration standard. So that means if it's Office 365 or Windows or Google G Suite, whatever it is, we're configuring it in the most secure way known that still allows it to be usable and practical. And there's an easy way to measure some of this stuff. We're going to talk about a couple of examples. I'm going to start with Microsoft Windows.
Well, I have a question on that, Eric. If
Yeah.
I've been doing all my security updates from Microsoft, isn't my machine then, isn't Windows 10 already hardened?
No, definitely not. And that's actually what I was going to talk about. Doing things like security updates and patches is part of this process, but it's not the majority of this process. The majority of it is turning off over 1,200 settings in Windows that are insecure by default. And you might wonder why Microsoft would make something insecure by default. It's because they make it easy to use and configure by default, and it's up to IT to do all this stuff and turn all the security stuff on, because it's probably not turned on right out of the box. And every cyber criminal knows what every default Windows setting is and how to exploit them. And that's where ransomware came from. They figured out that some of these default settings in Windows allowed somebody to, without having any sort of elevated privileges, encrypt all the information that they had access to. And that's one of the things that we turn off when we harden Windows for companies. This can be done across the board, across the entire organization fairly rapidly. We just did this with one of our pharmaceutical clients last Friday and hardened around 300 of their assets over the course of a day in order for their workforce to mobilize. So once hardened, there's a way to use test ransomware or other test malware to prove that the systems are protected against ransomware or whatever malware you're trying to protect it from. And these hardening steps turn off things like point-to-point file sharing or file sharing over Bluetooth, or things that people aren't going to be doing that are for some reason turned on by default. It's also going to give you the ability as the leaders in the business to decide if you want people to have access to copy data to USB drives. And for the majority of users these days, they probably don't need to. And while everybody's working from home, we definitely don't want them plugging untrusted USB drives into company computers and getting infected that way. We also want to talk for a moment about Microsoft 365. It's a very common system that's used to host email and business documents, and it can be made extremely secure. But right out of the box, it has no security, and there's an easy and free way to measure this. Matter of fact, if you have one of the admin accounts, or if you ask the head of IT to go to securityscore.microsoft.com, actually we can send a link out to this later on, but there's an easy website that you can go to and log in, and it'll actually tell you what your security score is, like this example right here that says 27 out of 300. So this means that this particular company that we got this example from does not have any security settings configured at all. They don't have multi-factor authentication turned on. Anybody can log in from anywhere in the world. And this means that during this time, they're very vulnerable to some sort of an attack or a breach. So this security score is a really easy metric that's free that everybody can look at and know if they have a risk or not.
And I think it's important to emphasize, I talk to a lot of people that tell me, well, why do I need to worry about Office 365? That's why I'm there. It's secure, right? It's at the cloud. It's a misconception that the cloud is secure. And it is a misconception, because what they've done is they've sold you something that's extremely usable, very helpful, but in order to make it so they have the least amount of tech support up front, they've made it like ridiculously usable. Everything is turned on. So the score that Eric is showing, this 27 out of a 302, is probably the absolute default, setup. So
right.
they're pretty much wide open to attacks, and 365 is one of the easiest things for cyber criminals to attack, because so many companies use it. So we're not saying don't use 365. 365 is great. We're saying you need to understand just like owning anything. Like if you own a nice car, you got to learn how to lock it when you walk away from it. And I'm kind of using a simple example, but that's the same thing with some of these tools that you use in the cloud. So I wrote that down. We'll send out that link like Eric offered, and it's a really good starting point on looking at your 365 security.
So we're going to talk about vulnerabilities right now. And this is something that, again, there's a lot of misconception about. This is not just installing Windows security patches and stuff like that. Vulnerabilities are insecure settings that cyber criminals know how to break into or know how to exploit. And sometimes this could be a flaw that the software manufacturer didn't know about. Sometimes it could be a setting that's, again, a default setting that needs to be changed. What I find amazing is that almost every time we onboard a new client, like 99% of the time, the first time we run a scan, a vulnerability scan on their environment, every one of them has the same VPN vulnerability, and it's usually a very high vulnerability, meaning it's very easy to exploit, it's easy for cyber criminals to break in. And in this case, firewall comes with the same very high vulnerability. And when you turn the VPN on, that vulnerability is exposed, and it can be easily fixed by reconfiguring a few things and not using some of the default settings. But like I said, 99% of the time, we see these default settings being used and these very high vulnerabilities existing on the VPN. And the vulnerabilities can exist on remote access technologies like remote desktop or other things. And it's very important that you have somebody run a real vulnerability scan on the outside of all of your environments right now, because however people are logging in remotely, cyber criminals can run these scans for free. There's nobody preventing them from doing that. And it's going to tell them all the ways they can break in, and it's going to rank them low, medium, and high. And right now, you need to be focusing on the highs, because cyber criminals are focusing on the highs, and they've got their machine guns pointed at them. We need to understand what those highs are and do something about it before somebody breaks in.
Right. And again, this is another trust but verify. You might want to ask your IT to show you a report showing you all the external vulnerabilities on your firewalls, your servers, your Office 365, et cetera, versus don't ever ask a question that's like, are we secure? And the answer is yes. And I would want to say, please show me how secure, please. Make it a essay question, not a yes or no question. It's one example of a really easy vulnerability that I think is pretty easy for everyone to understand on a firewall. The default setting on most of these firewalls is to allow external access, which makes IT be able to access it really easily remotely, but it's accessible directly on the internet instead of coming from the inside of your network. And they'll have like the default username, maybe it's admin. Well, a set of credentials is only a username and a password, so now you're 50% of the way there. Now all they've got to do is brute force, which means run a computer with trying different password combinations until they find the password. And they can do that really quickly with the types of supercomputers and stuff they've got. So anyway, that's just one example. But again, trust but verify.
Yeah, good example. know what vulnerabilities are exposed on all of your firewalls, servers, and Office 365. There are easy ways to scan for this. Cybercriminals are heavily attacking every exposed vulnerability right now, and they're going to be doubling down and doing this for the next several months, so don't give them the opportunity to break into you or any of your clients' information that you might host. The last thing that we wanted to talk about was proving that backups are safe and working. So now that everybody is set up with remote access and working from home, and you're trying to get back to business or do business in a new way, if there's a successful cyber attack and you don't actually have a way to get your data back, then that's going to become a mission-critical crisis. And we are recommending that you proactively ensure that all of your data, including your cloud data and whatever crown jewels are stored in the cloud, is being backed up to at least one separate environment that is segregated in a different cloud or on a different network that is not directly connected through something like a VPN or a direct network connection. This means that all of your data has to be backed up in at least one environment that is completely separate and isolated from the primary environment or environments. And all the security that we talked about today needs to apply to that backup environment also. And this includes Office 365. Do not rely on the default backup settings. Microsoft stores information for 30 days by default. And it's very easy, once cybercriminals break in, it's very easy for them to erase that. And you don't want to be in a situation where you no longer have a backup at all and a cybercriminal has owned you by breaking in, destroying all the backups that you have or had, and then encrypting your data and asking for a ransom. And what we're recommending is document where the crown jewels are stored, work with IT to perform a test recovery during the next week or two of all of the organization's key systems, document exactly how long that takes to restore, and work with them to prioritize the systems so they know what crown jewels are the most important. That way they know what to recover first, and you know exactly how long it's going to take.
So Eric, I wanted to comment on something. So that test recovery, I see a lot of firms say, well, IT is handling backups. Again, trust but verify. So let's say you lost your server or your data, your crown jewels, then you only have your backup to go to, okay? That's not when you want to test it. You don't test the parachute after you jump out of the plane, okay? You test the parachute before you jump out of the plane. So you want to make sure this is probably one of the most important things that you want to get that trust but verify with your IT department or whoever is doing your IT for you. You want to see that recovered file or directory or whatever of from each of the locations of the crown jewels. You want to know how long they're not only how long it takes to restore the data, but how long are they keeping the data, okay? Like how far back can you go? If it's just a one day, then that may not be enough for you. Because what if some mistakes made and you can't get that one backup back? Backups, by the way, don't always work perfectly. It's good to keep more than one backup. More than one backup point. You want to go back at least multiple days, minimum, okay? And your backups you prefer a lot longer. So this is really important that you verify that this is working, because if you lose everything to a breach and then your backups don't work, no one's going to care when your client calls you and says, why can't you do blah, blah, blah for me? And you go, I'm sorry, I don't have the files. We lost it all. No one's going to care that you said, oh, well, I thought IT was handling this. It's your responsibility as the business owner or the managing partner to make sure that all this stuff is in place. Manage this stuff. You can't just delegate it or abdicate, worst case, to someone else.
And now's the time to prove that this is working more than ever. Now's the time to get the evidence and make sure that all the crown jewels are backed up. You know where they are, and you know how long it takes to recover them, and you know the backups are safe and are not going to get broken into.
And one more thing on that. One last point. Yeah. Sorry, one last point on that. Make sure, this is just a training issue. with your workers that are working remotely, if they are using a VPN or some other method that and remember, we said don't allow them to transfer files to their local machine. But let's say it's a employer-owned machine, and they are putting files, they're allowed to put out files on that local machine. Make sure that they save them back to your whatever location is being backed up, or ask your IT department how those corporate laptops are being backed up. Because what you don't want to see is everyone working remotely, they're storing stuff locally, and then something happens to that machine and they lose a lot of valuable work.
So we probably don't have time to go over these questions, but these are really simple questions. We'd be happy to email them to everyone. And these are the questions that you should be asking, and you should be asking your head of IT. And this is the type of questions that need evidence, not just a yes or no answer. And it's not like Dave said, are we secure? Yep, we're totally secure. These are the pointed questions that let you know that you're secure. How would you know if a bad actor logged into your email from a computer in Russia right now? How would you know if one of your employees' passwords got phished? So if anybody is interested in this list of questions or anything else that we've talked about today, please let us know. We're happy to send them. And I wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions. So Ivan, maybe I can turn it back over to you so that we can open up questions and let us answer them.
Thanks again, Dave, Eric, and Kevin for the presentation. We'll now begin. We'll do, we've got time for like one question now, so I'll go ahead and ask it, and whoever feels appropriate to answer, go ahead and jump in. Is log me in or go to my PC okay to use for remote working?
So I'll take that one. The answer is yes, if you have done all the stuff that we talked about during the webinar today. Enabled multi-factor authentication, made sure that people can only go to log me in or go to my PC or whatever that is from a computer that is in your geography. Make sure that you cannot log into those computers through go to my PC or log me in from a computer in Russia if you don't have anybody working from home in Russia right now. It's that simple.
I would add one thing to that too. I would prefer that you have a corporate, the account for the remote access be owned by the actual employer, so that the employer can enforce that two-factor auth versus someone just using their own home version of log me in that doesn't require that two-factor authentication or leaves the decision up to them.
Excellent point. Excellent point.
Perfect. So I want to thank our presenters for this valuable information, and thanks to everyone who joined. As mentioned earlier, we'll be adding additional webinars in the coming days that'll further drill down on some of these topics. As a reminder, if you haven't registered, tomorrow we have our legal and HR webinar, which is going to be presented by Brian Kegley of Poole, Shaffrey, and Kegley. And then again, in our e-blast this morning, we did send out a survey asking all businesses to participate so that we can address what resources are most needed. For additional business resources, please visit our website, scvchamber.com, under the COVID-19 tab for more details. And once again, Martini Akpovi Partners Cybersecure is offering 10% off their services for any current standing chamber members. If you want to take advantage of that, email us at hello@scvchamber.com and we'll assist you. Thanks again for joining us. Please be safe, be healthy, and let us know how the chamber can help you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.